everybody. So as you see, I've got contact open within Logic, but I don't really need that. What I wanted to do today was talk about contact and battery and reactor. And I'm probably going to spend most of my time on contact and reactor because I love them so. And batteries, but batteries cool too, and I want to show some design ideas that we can get out of it. So contact is immensely powerful, but what can be really daunting sometimes is the architecture of the plugin itself is a little hard to understand. It's laid out a little differently than most other samplers are. It's extremely powerful, and they're incorporating a lot of stuff in contact that they use in other synths. But it's become near and dear to me, and it's part of my workflow. And I want to help to, first of all, get rid of some of the mysteries, and then also show you some things that people don't even look at. Like the AET filter, or using zone envelopes, things like that that are particular to contact. So I'm running contact within Logic. Of course, I don't have to. I can run it as a standalone. And a lot of times when I'm doing sound design, I'll actually open it on its own as a standalone, do all of my design, and then open it within a DAW. But here's a trick. There's not a lot of levels of undo in contact, so it ends up happening if I have it open in Logic 10. Logic 10 is actually recording every move you make, and it saves plugin states as well. So this is just a little pro tip. If you open it within a DAW, there's a good chance that as you're saving, you're going to save more data of your contact instance than you might have if you opened it standalone. So here we have contact, and up at the top we have the browser, where we can open up all of our libraries. These are libraries that were created specifically for contact. And then we have our file browser and all that kind of stuff. We also have the master editor, which gives us our BPM, which is right now it's tied to my Logic song. Master tuning, metronome, all that kind of stuff. The info tab, basically anything that you float over, it gives you info about. Our output section, now this is kind of important actually, because what a lot of people don't realize is that they can create stereo channel strips and auxiliaries in contact just like they would in Pro Tools or Logic or anything else. It's got a full-blown mixer built into it. That's really powerful. You can actually come onto any one of these and pop in filters or EQs or effects. So we're going to talk a little bit later about how you set up specific channel strips in here to match your DAW and match your workflow. So that's our outputs. We have our keyboard. We have files to create a new instrument. This is where we go. And so I'm going to create a new instrument. You can also create a new instrument just by throwing files at it. If you throw a file into this area here, it'll just automatically pop open an instrument, which is pretty cool. Our options give us things like how big do we want our interface fonts to be, and engine and handling and all this kind of stuff, but that's not really what we're going to cover today. Today I want to get our hands dirty in here. So when we open it up by hitting this little wrench, we get the instrument settings at the top, and then we get 5 tabs. We have our instrument options, a group editor, a mapping editor, a wave editor, and a script editor. Most of the time, we're going to be spending our time in the group editor, the mapping editor, and the wave editor. Now up top, we can decide which outputs this instrument is going to. We can set what MIDI channel it's going to be receiving. Right now it's set to 1, but if I set it to Omni, it'll receive anything. We can also set it to be specific channels from Logic if we want. Then I have how many voices it is. That'll come into play when we start actually putting samples in here. The minimum and maximum. And then we have sample purge. So if you hear something glitching out like crazy, you can just completely purge all your samples and it will reload them. Solo and mute, because in the contact rack, we can have more than one of these instruments. We can have what's called a multi-instrument, which is when things start to get really complicated. Okay, tuning, we got our panner, we got our volume. Now, let's get down into these editors. If I open up the group editor, basically this is an empty group. We need to talk about the hierarchy of contact right now. So in contact, you have your waves, which are your actual samples that you load in. Then you have the mapping editor, which is where you create zones for these individual samples. So you can kind of say that a zone equals a sample. Okay? A zone can't have more than one sample. So your wave editor is where you edit the sound waves. Your mapping editor is where you map everything out. And then your group editor is where you take groups of zones and make them all work. It's kind of difficult sometimes to look through this whole thing and like try to make it through all these, mapping editor, wave editor, group editor. All of these are open at the same time, so they're all arranged vertically. If I want to, I just hit this little tab, and it won't happen in the AU version. So that sucks, but I'll have to open it on its own to do that. I didn't know it worked that way. Okay, well that's a minor setback. Basically what happens is it pops out into its own screen, which is really good when you're doing sound design. So now I figured out another reason why I like to do sound design outside the Logic. But kind of one of these, am I gonna trust the autosave more than I'm going to want to open the mapping editor? So anyway, if I go into the mapping editor, we can actually throw our samples right into the screen. So I'm gonna go to my Finder, and I'm gonna find my hard drive here. And I've got some samples. Let's see, AK-47 maybe? Yeah, sure, why not? Now, watch this. So if I pull up and down, it's automatically sizing a zone for me. It's kind of giving me kind of a 6-note zone. But if I pull all the way up to the top, it'll take up the entire keyboard. So that's what I'm going to do for now. It's very important that you figure out what your key range is. So right now my AR-15 it's got a root note at C-2. Now this is common to all samplers. If you put your root note way the hell down there, anything I play up in a normal playable range is going to sound way too high. So we have to change that root note up to C3. Now let's say I drag in another gunshot. That's one thick AK-47. And I'm going to drag that in as well. So here's another thing that gets people confused. Okay, I have two zones that are overlapping. How do I deal with them? Because I don't know how I can select the zone behind it. Well, here's what you do. First of all, let me move my root. Whoa, dude. Okay. And I got a list view, and there you go. I've got AR-15 and the AK-47. So it's a really quick way that I can jump back and forth between zones and know what I'm dealing with. Now, the one thing I wanted to talk about today that's special, because I could just sit here and go through the entire contact, and then we'd be getting drinks at 4 in the morning, and I wouldn't have even scratched the surface with you. But I want to go over some specific things that people overlook when it comes to sound design and using the instrument creatively. So I get an AR-15, and I have an AK-47. They obviously have very different sounds, right? One's like huge and thuddy, and the other one's really kind of biting and percussive. And I want to use both of these in an instrument. And what I want to do is I want to try and blend their characteristics together. And there's an interesting effect that's built into Contact called the AET filter. And basically what it does is it analyzes one sound's FFT signature, and it analyzes another one's sort of timbral signature. And then you're able to morph between those. So instead of just using like volume to go back and forth between these two sounds, it's taking sort of the sonic timbre characteristics of one and the sonic timbre characteristics of another, and it's allowing you to blend them in interesting ways using something called the morph function. So let's go ahead and jump into our group effects. So I've got these two zones that take up the entire deal, and before I even put on the AET filter, I need to analyze them to see what their signature is, to see kind of what their sort of timbral makeup is. So I'm going to go into Edit. I'm going to say Create AET Morph Layer. And I'm going to call this one AR-15. So it's not tonal. So I'm going to turn off the tonal bit, because if it was tonal, you know, like say we were using like a piano, a lot of you in here are using Contact in a musical creative way. So imagine this: you have a piano and you have a xylophone. So you have a piano sample and a xylophone sample. Wouldn't it be cool if you took the timbral qualities of the piano and the timbral qualities of a xylophone and started blending between them as you play? That's pretty cool. So we're going to do that in
this realm using these two guns and kind of see what they sound like. So I've got the AR-15 sort of timbral palette, and I'm going to hit OK, and it analyzes it. Then I'm going to go to the AK-47. And I'm going to create a morph layer there as well. AK-47, man, that thing sounds pretty thick for an AK-47. Okay. All right, now, the zones are overlapping. There are two ways that you can do these morph layers. One is called a velocity layer. The other one is an articulation layer. If you do a velocity layer, it's assuming that as you go up in velocity, you're changing over from one sample to another sample. But if you do an articulation layer, it's saying that both of these are playing at one time and we're mixing the timbres together. So I will go to Edit, and I'm going to add an AET velocity morph. Do you really want to do this? Yes, I do, please. Oh, they belong to other morph layers. So what I'm going to do now is come down here to my effects, my group effects, hit the little plus. Okay, now I should probably explain this just before I jump through it. I'm going to take my wave editor out of the way and my mapping editor so that we just see the group editor. So remember, a group is a bunch of zones that are put together, and then the zones have samples in them, right? So effects in Contact are insane. They're totally crazy because you can add them per group. So it's like having an entire effects rack per group. You know, and a group is a bunch of zones, which is a bunch of samples, yada, yada, right? So imagine if you had 17, 18, 25 groups, and each one of those has their own rack of effects. We're talking like reverb, filters, all kinds of stuff, cabinets, tape emulators, formant shift, all that kind of stuff. You can have that per group. You can have that. Then you can also have effects sends. So you can send from each group to a global effect, which is in your send effects. And then you have what are called insert effects for the entire instrument. Okay, and as if that wasn't enough places to jam effects, you can go to the outputs and you can pop effects into your output as well. So it's pretty crazy. You can get totally lost in how to mix things within Contact if you don't have a good understanding of how the signal's routed through the thing. Because it's not, in a lot of samplers, what you get is you usually have an oscillator, or your sample and your what's filtering it, and then your amplifier. Below that, you'd have like a modulation section, right? And like everything's right there and ready to go. In Contact, you kind of have to jump around a little bit. There's a little bit of vertical gymnastics that we have to do, and I'm going to show you that once we get into morphing. So I'm going to concentrate on the group effects right now. So these effects will be applied to both of the zones that we created, the AR-15 and the AK-47. I'm going to go to Add Effects, under Effects, choose AET Filter. Now, whenever you pop an effect in, all of its parameters pop up directly underneath it. So right now I have no morph map available. I have to create one. Now I created morph layers. This starts to get really confusing. The morph layers are per zone. The morph map is when you take multiple morph layers and put them together. Yeah, when I first went through and was like discovering this, I just wanted to, but yeah, but this is pretty cool. So edit morph map. Morph map. That's a tongue twister. So I don't have one yet, so I'm going to create one. Add. Oh, I got to give it a name. Okay, so this is ARAK1547. And I click Add, and it pops up. Now, this is where we decide. You remember that a velocity morph is sort of like as we go up in velocities and we pass from one zone into another zone, that's where it does the morph between those two zones. If we have zones that take up, you know, if we want to take two complete zones that are 0 to 127 in velocity and have them both play at the same time, we would use an articulation morph. I'm going to choose the layers from the right and have them go into my morph map. It is like the geekiest thing I've ever done. Okay, there we go. Now, as you see, there's no morph map. So I need to come up here and choose it. And now that I've chosen it, The second I hit a key, it activates the morph map. And if I choose morph and start pulling it to the right, we're going to hear its timbre change. So what's kind of cool now is we can grab the knob and we can move it, and that's cool. What would be more cool is if we could have the morph knob change over time according to a modulator. So as anybody who's taken a class with me knows, my language is very specific. So whenever I talk about a sample and a zone and a group, like I'm absolutely talking about a sample or a zone or a group, and they have these properties that are like set in stone. When I talk about a modulator, okay, a modulator would be something like an envelope or an LFO, or even something like velocity. And what it's like is it's like a ghost hand that's going and turning a knob. So any section of contact, when you turn a knob, that's a parameter. Anything that can turn that knob for you would be a modulator. So what I'm going to do here is I want to assign a modulator to change morph over time, okay? And it's going to be pretty fast, so I'm probably going to use an envelope because this isn't something that just sustains. It doesn't just sit there like an ambience or a wind or something like that. It's something that happens very quickly, so I'm probably going to want to use an envelope to make this work. So I'm coming down to where it says mod, and this is how we add a modulator, which is weird and unlike other synths and can be very frustrating. So I click mod, and it says add a modulator. Now, there's another way that we can add a modulator. If I go to the morph knob and I just right-click on it, choose envelope, hey, check it out. I can put an envelope on there. Attack, hold, decay, sustain, release, flexible envelope, or decay, break, decay. Now, AHDSR, that's pretty standard. This is also a very small envelope. This would be actually very good for this sound. But if I want a lot of control, I'd probably use the flexible envelope. Hey, where's my envelope? Witness, one of the things that is very confusing about Contact. The envelope didn't just pop up underneath. I have to go look for it. They show you the influence of the envelope right here. This is the intensity of your envelope over this parameter, which is morph. They also give you a little map that I'll talk to you about in a bit. But then there's this little thing. This little tiny button right here takes you down to the modulation section. So in Contact 5, down at the bottom, there's an actual whole section that's dedicated to just doing modulation. So I'll click on that. And there we go. It takes me right to my modulator. See how it says morph right here? This is showing me that this envelope is assigned to morph, and if I click on this, it takes me back up. So I guess it's better than nothing. That's such a jerk thing for me to say. All right, so here I've got this flexible envelope, and what's beautiful about the flexible envelope is that it's an envelope that we can actually create points on just by right-clicking, which is really, really cool. Now, I don't want a really long attack on this thing because it's percussive, so I'll drag this back. And, I'll pull this down. And I'll go up and see how we're doing with our morph. So you see that it goes down, but unlike other envelopes where it would just go down, we can actually have it come back up through the AK-47 timbre and then pass down again a couple of times. And what's neat about that is that you can actually create some really interesting effects if you're doing something like a gunshot that goes, ba-boom, boom. It sounds like it's reverberating through a space, or it could be just something that's weird. It's traveling through some sort of medium that's really strange, and you're trying to solve a problem with like, okay, I've got this projectile that flies through air first, and then it smacks into a bunch of jello. Okay, what does that sound like? A ballistic gel or something. These are the kind of things that I stay awake at night, thinking of. But that's how you create a morph layer and a morph map, and it's really, really cool. And I just showed you like using a gunshot, right? But as you can imagine, if you use this in music, you take a string and a brass instrument, or you take a string section and a brass section, and then you merge both of their, timbres together, and you can do really interesting stuff. Or if you take, a garbage can lid and a woman screaming and put them together, it can make something interesting. Or sterno and a cymbal or something, it could do really interesting stuff. So the more that you add to that morph layer, the more weird you can get, because I'm only using 2. I can have many more than that. And what I can do is adjust. You saw how my envelope was passing through those morph layers. Well, I'm using an envelope right now, which is very smooth, right? It goes kind of smoothly through the morph layer. But the kind of stuff that we can use as modulators in Kontakt are really cool. So right now I'm using an envelope, but I'm going to get rid of that. And I want to check out some of the other stuff, like hello? Yeah, okay. Hello? Can you hear me now? I want to get rid of this modulator. There we go. And now I want to put a new one there, but it's giving me the old one because I have not deleted it. That's why. Coffee. So under the modulators, check this out. I love existing. Like, what is that? Others. Others has some cool stuff. 32 times step modulator. What the heck is that? Well, check this out. Okay, what's kind of neat when you assign a new modulator is that it will automatically assign itself to what the old modulator was assigned to. So we had that envelope set to the morph. Over here, if we go to the right, hey, look, it's still set to morph. If I want to choose a different parameter, they're all in a list right here. Okay, so let's go down to the step modulator. Well, first of all, let me make, okay, it's still working. So I come down here. Hey, look at that. That's kind of cool. So basically, as I hold a note down, it can step through all of these different values. Now, granted, I have it assigned to, right now I have it assigned to morph. So we'll have to go up to morph and make sure that this thing is working correctly. Yeah, there we go. So instead of smoothly passing between different parts of the morph layer, we can have it in one part of the morph layer and the other part of the morph layer and back again, which can make for some really cool effects. Now, if you're using this in a musical context, you'd come down to the step modulator and you would say, hey, you know what? I want you to be set to, there we go. So this sets it to 12 steps, and you'll see that it also assigns it to a note value. So if you wanted to do something musically, like assign this to pitch, it would affect the pitch in a way that you could predict. And it will also follow tempo, which is pretty cool. Okay, so that's the basics of the articulation morph map in Kontakt 5. Here's something really cool. If you made an instrument, and let's say you went and you sampled a synthesizer and you got all these multiple samples and everything, and you went through all the hard work of getting all the velocity layers and everything put together, you can actually go to your mapping editor and you can select those zones, and you can have it automatically create the AET morph layers and the maps and create the proper velocity layers. It'll do that for you automatically, which is really cool. If you're building your own sound libraries of custom instruments, it's absolutely essential, because you can't get, it's very, very difficult to get absolutely perfect recordings that at every velocity level they sound like they're related to each other. And the AET filter is what gets you closer to having a sound library that sounds realistic at any velocity. Okay? So the AET filter is using fast Fourier transform, which is, that's how it gets its sort of timbral shape. Forgot to mention that earlier, but it's pretty cool. So the other thing I wanted to talk about when it came to Kontakt is I wanted to talk about using zone envelopes. I'm going to use this nice AK-47 gunshot. I'm going to get rid of this zone. Leaves me with the AK. Yo, the AK. I'm going to get rid of this AET filter. You can also bypass the AET filter if you just click right here. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to cut it. Woof. All right. I think I'll turn the juice down on that a little bit. Cool. Okay. So this is our mapping editor. Now I'm going to go into the wave editor. The wave editor is going to show me whatever is in the zone that I have selected. So I'll change the end, pull it back a little bit. Okay, that's cool. Now down below that, we have 4 different tabs. And sample loop is if you have something that's looping and you want to have it conform to tempo. Sync and slice would be, I'm going to show you how to use that in a second. Zone envelopes. So zone envelopes are a way that you can adjust a parameter, but do it while you're looking at the waveform. Okay? So the last thing that I touched was this thing that says frequency. I'm going to actually create a new effect. I'm going to choose a filter. And let's see. I'm going to use a low-pass filter. Wow, look at all these filters. The filters in Contact 5 are rad. But there are some people who will jump down to these filters that say legacy, thinking like, oh, legacy, that must mean that they're like, you know, analog and cool and old. That's not true. These are actually just in here so that your older libraries can open. The ones up top, SV and ladder and AR, these are all better and clearer and nicer and sound beautiful. So these are called SV, stands for state variable. We have the ladder, which is this is like the oldest kind of filter you had, where you'd go through a series of resistors, and they called it a ladder because it kind of looked like a ladder. Then we have something called, so this is adjustable resonance. So these are kind of funny filters, and people will sometimes use them and not understand what's happening. If you put a lot of volume into this filter and you have a high resonance, what would normally happen is you'd get distortion, and it would clip and sound. To some people, it'd be, you know, deliberate and sound good. To some people, it would sound like crap. So what the AR filters do is they adjust your resonance depending on how much volume is coming in. So if it's a lower volume, it'll be higher resonance, and higher volume is lower resonance. So I just think it's kind of important if I'm going to start filtering to tell you guys about that. Daft LP, that's actually, it's called Daft because of who? Daft Punk. It's basically a low-pass filter that's kind of aggressive and, you know, is inspired by the infamous duo. And then we have Pro 53, which is based off of a filter that they had in an old synth called the Pro 53 that I miss dearly. Rest in peace. It's a really cool filter. But I would stick to these filters up here when you're going to do filtering. All right, so I'm going to use the state variable low-pass 4-pole filter. And of course, when I pop it up, some stuff pops up down below. So I'm going to click on cutoff, and I'm going to pull it down. And I'll pull my resonance up. I'll pull my cutoff down a little more. And if I go to the zone envelope, look what it says right here. It says add cutoff. The last parameter of the effect that I selected is the thing that will show up as a zone envelope, because it's assuming that that's kind of like, oh, well, he was just messing with cutoff before he came over here. So let's add that. Now, you note the red line. This is where we can start creating our own envelope that's going to control the cutoff of this filter. But what's neat is we can see the waveform, and it gives us an idea of how this envelope is going to affect this wave over time, instead of us having to eyeball it or just use our ears, which is kind of cool. And in true NI style, you can just right-click to create points. Oops, I did not want to have an envelope loop. Please go away. Bastard. Okay. If you also right-click and drag, it gives you an envelope loop, which is not what I wanted to do. Get out of here. Get out of here, envelope loop. I don't want you. I'll put it out of the range of the sample. So now, so we can hear that the cutoff, we start getting some really cool effects. So the resonance being really high. Yeah, when you want to create your space machine gun. And then I select resonance, and I can actually add that resonant zone envelope. So I'll have the resonance actually go up over time. So I love zone envelopes. They're really, really fun. And I highly suggest that you get with it because it's really pretty cool. Cool? Now, per zone, per sample, right? This is why I have to go back to the language that I set up in the beginning, because we have samples, we have zones, we have groups. Groups are collections of zones that are collections of samples. A zone has one sample. If we do zone envelopes, then we're affecting that zone. We're affecting that zone using a zone envelope, which is assigned to the group effect, which is affecting the group. So it's a little like mental gymnastics there. But as you see, the effect that we have, this low-pass filter, it is assigned to the group. So when we're doing a zone envelope, it's cool because we're seeing a transient that we can use this envelope on, but we always have to keep in mind that it's affecting the filter, which is assigned to the group. Okay? Okay, next, I wanted to talk about, well, first I want to get rid of my, see, here are my zone envelopes. I'm going to delete them. There we go. Now I'm back to normal, except of course my cutoff is way down. Turn my resonance down. Sweet. And what I want to do now is I'm going to go to my mapping editor. I'm going to cut this zone. And I'm going to drag in some footsteps. Oh, I had these converted. Well, here's my little trick when I end up doing that. Drag it into Logic. Let Logic convert it. I carry my sound library as high quality MP3s sometimes when I'm kind of running around with my laptop. But now it has been created as these are all library sounds, which means that they are part of a sound library that I bought many, many moons ago. So here I got these footsteps. I'm going to pop those into Contact. So I'm going to open up my Finder window. I'm going to go to my desktop. Go to Contact, Audio Files. Hey, there's an AIF. Let's drag that in. Contact likes to see AIFs. Ah, you bastard. Dude, seriously? Huh. Okay. Well, I think it's about time that I add a zone. I think I might want to actually open this in, yeah, I'm going to open this standalone to do this stuff. By logic, just for a moment. I'll be back soon. Yes, I anthropomorphize my DAW. Don't judge me. Because this is supposed to be like, hey, look how easy this is. Okay, so I have a new blank instrument. I want to make sure that under contact, one thing that's kind of funny is we want to go to our options and make sure that our MIDI is happening here. Sometimes it'll actually forget that I have MIDI, but this time it did a good job. So jump back into my Finder, go to my desktop, go to my contact session where I had this lovely audio file, drag it in, and it makes a new instrument automatically. And it names the instrument according to the audio file, which is kind of cool. I open it up. There's my group. Here's my mapping editor. It sort of guesstimated where it was going to go. So if I hold down a key, it'll just play that entire file. But if I go to the wave editor, okay, I want to also make sure that my audio, not built in, Sapphire, please. Thank you. Oh yeah? Channel 2? I beg to differ. You're going Omni, buddy. And you're not seeing my MIDI because you just want to embarrass me in front of all these people. Why do you want to embarrass me? That's so sad. Oh, yeah, see? It forgot my MIDI. Hallelujah! Okay. So here I have footsteps. I'm playing the entire file with one key. That's not ideal. Let's go to the wave editor again. And I'm going to choose Sync Slice, and I'm going to turn on the grid. Now, the grid has a fixed grid, which is when you're doing things that are tempo-based. It also has something called auto. And what auto does is it's going to search for transients based on amplitude. So I turn this down a bit. And it gives me all these individual zones. Did I say zones? I'm foreshadowing too much. Basically, what I want to do, I want to be able to play each one of these as a file. So if you click here, this is normally where you drag it to your host and then get a whole bunch of zones. Unfortunately, it's not working right now. Key space, reduce the number of slices, move the source zone to a higher key range. Ah, okay, interesting. So in my zone, I need to go back to my mapping editor because my mapping editor, I need to start it as far down as I can. And I want to make sure that I can grab as many of these slices as possible. Sometimes it won't be possible. Sometimes you'll have to actually go in and cut that audio file up, which is sad, but, you know, necessary. Yeah, I still have too many, so I got to decrease my zones. Ah, you bastard. You jerk. Why you little. Huh. Okay. I might have to cut this audio file down a little bit in order for it to work properly, because it's running out of keys on the keyboard in order to put all of these steps in. It's a really long file, so I guess I will have to open up Logic to do this. Gosh darn it. What's that?
You just move the pen down?
Oh, that's a good idea. No. Well, fix will do it in... Well, I mean, I can do it like that, and then it'll do it in quarter notes. The only problem with that, yeah, it's still not giving me, it's still too much for the key space. I just need to edit it. This worked so great when I was at home last night. All right, let's take this. I'm going to split you here. Take this file, save it as its own audio file onto the desktop. There we go. Let's delete this zone. And I'm going to go to my desktop. And oh, you know what? I think I know what it was. I think I know why that didn't work. Yeah, the reason it didn't work is that I used all the keys for my zone, so there are no keys left over. You have to start with a small zone, and then it'll automatically populate out. So, my bad. Sorry. I guess the coffee didn't hit. But now my footsteps are on individual keys. Fun. So theoretically, I'm going to pull in the big dog again. So I'm going to get rid of all that. And I'm going to go back into Contact, and I'm going to choose the long file because darn it. All right. 9.3 megs, yes. So choose a nice little slice. Dave, you idiot. Turn your grid on. Select your, oh, see, now it's doing something else, right? Get your endpoint back there. Okay, you know what? We're starting you over again. Get in there. No, don't save. Boom. Open. Mapping editor. Get down there. Make it small. There we go. Wave editor. Auto. That looks more like it. Yay. I'm sorry. It just stuff like this sometimes makes me batty. Still too many. Is that more than 127? Yeah. Oh man, that sucks. I know, right? Well, it worked with the smaller file, so I guess I'm happy, but let's try. I'm just going to try one last thing, and then I swear I'll give up. Ha! Ah! Okay. Yeah, that'll be great on the recording. I hope there's a compressor up there.
Very much like to thank Pyramind for hosting me here once again. I think this institution is really cool, and until I came here for the first time, I had never seen anything like it in my whole life.
What I think really separates us from other people who teach is that we are outrageously passionate about what we do, and especially in electronic music.
Since coming to Pyramind, I've discovered electronic music, and San Francisco being a mecca for underground electronic music opened up so many doors for me, and kind of blew my mind.
We cover everything from absinthe to Contact. When people get to the mind-melting level, we get into modular synthesis.
Everything about native instruments, everything about Logic synths down to the finest detail. We learned it all.
The fundamentals of understanding how things work, that's just essential. But then beyond that, there's so much more, and that's where it gets into just a lot of the artistic side of like the creative approach of why you do something, not just how.
There's a lot of schools that just, they focus on the technicality of recording music, but I wanted something that would foster creativity and really helped me develop as an artist as well.
Each of our genre-specific programs comes in 4 levels. There's a basic, an advanced, a professional, and then a master's level. And the master's level is, of course, everything we do. It's the largest and most powerful programs that we can create for you.